Well, everyone, let's go and take a look at the differences between Google Maps and Apple Maps and see which specific one you should go ahead and use on an everyday basis. Now, personally, from my personal experience, I use both of these maps for the most part. Usually I use Google Maps probably 80% of the time, and Apple Maps I use 20% of the time, and there's some reasons why that's the case, but I am engrossed in Apple's ecosystem. I use pretty much all of Apple products for the most part, but I also use a ton of Google products, and not only Google hardware, but also software as well. And Google Maps is my go-to map, application, even though I use an Apple product. But like I said, there's some reasons why I use Apple Maps like 20-15% of the time. Now, in their core, like at their core features, they do pretty much exactly the same thing. So they get you from point A to point B. They can show you destinations on the way. And both these maps get updates. Both these maps get, new features here and there. And typically, if there's like some crazy advanced feature that comes within Google Maps, most of the time Apple Maps will also go through and pretty much, integrate that feature too, and vice versa. Now, I will say for the most part, I think some new Apple Maps improvements have been kind of getting a little bit more interest because they've been showcasing some of these features at their developer conferences here and there. But regardless, both these, apps are very, very crucial. And, I will say for the most part, before getting too deep, Apple Maps kind of had this, stereotype of being this like super bad map application, and it would lead you into the middle of the ocean and you wouldn't know where you are. That I would say has been I would say that has not really been the case for many, many years now. I don't even really use Apple Maps that much, but since, using it 20-15% of the time, whatever you want to call it, it's been a very good map application. But like I said, Google Maps has always been a little bit better for me, and I've always went down that direction. Now, you can get, Apple Maps on all of your Apple products for the most part, except like HomePods and stuff, but you can get it on your iPhones, iPads, your Macs. You can use Apple Maps on all of your, Apple products, which is nice. Unfortunately, you cannot use Apple Maps in its full capacity on, your Android device or on your Android tablet or on your Windows PC. You can use like bits and pieces of it. You can access like a few things here and there, but it is not the full-fledged Apple Maps application, so it doesn't really count. So that is kind of a big issue there. On the Google Maps side, you can use Google Maps on basically all devices out there. You can get it on smartwatches. You can get it on you can use it on, your Apple Watch a little bit kind of. You can use it on your Mac, your, Windows PC, your Linux machine. You can use it everywhere, mostly because it is kind of like a web-based application. So you can use Google Maps pretty much every single way you want to. So whichever product you have, you can probably rest assured that you can get access to Google Maps, which that in and of itself is a really cool thing. Now, I will say on top of that, within, certain applications like, CarPlay or Android Auto, you can still use Google Maps on both Android Auto and on CarPlay. Unfortunately, you cannot use Apple Maps on Android Auto because it is not supported on an Android device, so it completely makes sense. So that might be another thing you may want to keep in mind there as well. Now, I want to talk about the UI a little bit to the user interface. Now, I will tell you, I don't think there's one I prefer. Both of them look very, very good. And I will say, if you're going to drive somewhere, I feel like both of these applications are very clunky. I feel like for the core features that I want, like every time I use Google Maps and every time I use Apple Maps, I do feel like things change up so often that it just kind of conflicts. Like I'll try to click one thing, and maybe it's the glitchiness behind these applications sometimes, but I'll click one thing and it'll go ahead and take me to like 3 different like areas of the display. And then like it takes me a little bit of time to get used to it still to this day, even though I've been using Google Maps for so long. With Apple Maps, it's the same exact thing. So although they are like very like simplistic applications, I still find myself randomly clicking things or random things not working sometimes. And I experience that on both these applications. I will say though, since I use Google Maps more, I found more issues kind of going along with it. But if I used Apple Maps more, I'm sure I would probably find just as many, if not more issues with Apple Maps than on, Google Maps for the most part. Now, I do want to say one other thing between both. The Apple products that I mentioned earlier, the reason why I use Apple Maps for like whatever percentage I use it for is because of the integration. It works well with my other devices. So what I mean by that is if I'm driving somewhere and I'm using Google Maps, well, I can pretty much, load it up on my CarPlay device and pretty much just move on from there, which is cool. And I can just keep looking at the screen. It'll announce to me to take a left here and there. But a reason why I like Apple Maps sometimes is because I can actually go ahead and get kind of notified or ringed on my Apple Watch that I need to, take a turn here, that I need to go straight, that I need to take the left merge charge or whatever the case is, things like that actually integrate really well with Apple products. I know I can do the same thing with some other devices too, and you can get notified with Google Maps as well as a standard notification. But with Apple Maps, it gives a little bit of a different approach. It just vibrates your phone like crazy, and it reminds you to kind of stay in the lane, or if you forgot or if you have the volume down, it actually reminds you to kind of, it just works well with different Apple products. So the reason I use that typically is if I'm going running, or if I'm going through and, on a long car ride and I happen to use Apple Maps, or if I click a link and it automatically opens up in Apple Maps, I will typically just keep it there, and I'm reminded how nice Apple Maps works with my other products too, which is really cool. So I think that in and of itself is another really cool thing as well. Now, I will also add that Google Maps, the UI in and of itself, like with the map itself, does look overall better in my experience than with Apple Maps. I think this can be completely personal. You may not like Apple Maps that much, or you may love Apple Maps and the map interface. Personally, I like how Google Maps is. I love the colors of that application. And I do think if I'm going to be staring at a display or whatever, if I'm going to be, in one application for so many hours, then it should be nice to have like colors that you like. And I do think the Google Maps application kind of looks a little bit better than Apple Maps for the most part. So that's kind of one thing to keep in mind. Now, in the battery life department, I haven't really been able to test the difference between Apple Maps and Google Maps from a battery perspective, mostly because, I have it plugged in most of the time I've been using Apple Maps because it's in CarPlay. But I will say, from what I've heard from tons of people, Apple Maps is more optimized for an, Apple product than on Google Maps. People say the same thing about Google applications on iPhones or on Mac products. Things like, Google Chrome is a big one, and some other applications too. But personally, I don't really think it's as big of a difference. Most of the time you're using your, navigation system on your phone, and you're in a car. Usually it's because you're having it plugged in, and it's usually on CarPlay. So your phone is charged up, and it's not as big of a deal. If I was playing games and stuff, that might be one big thing to keep in mind. But I think for the most part, I like Apple Maps because it's a little bit more optimized in that standpoint. But I do like Google Maps a lot too, because most of the time you're going to have it plugged in for the most part. Now, in terms of that kind of covers up the main differences between both. Now, I will tell you, between both of these applications, there really isn't a right or wrong one. I feel like if I was more engrossed into the Apple ecosystem, which I already am, but if I was super engrossed within all the other, Apple applications for the most part, and if I really depended on, my watch reminding me to take turns here and there and whatever, then I think Apple Maps might be the one I would use on a everyday basis for the most part, whenever I would, go on long car rides or I needed a navigation app. But I think Google Maps, it just works better for me. I already have everything preloaded on there, and because I can still access it on all of my other devices for the most part, it is a really nice touch, and that is something that I really do like about Google Maps. But I like Apple Maps because it does work well with my other Apple products, and because I already have Find My enabled, I can be able to see my same Apple Maps and my, Find My applications, like my, stuff that I own as well. It's a really nice touch, and I really do like that, and I like how it is kind of integrated well with my Apple Watch as well. So again, I don't think there's like a clear winner of like, oh, this is the one to, use. But if you use Google Maps, you're really not missing out much on Apple Maps, and the same exact thing vice versa. If you're using Apple Maps, you're really not missing out much on Google Maps either. So in terms of that kind of covers it up. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.